Hello, everyone. This is Nikki with another episode of Backyard Politics. I want you to know that we're being lied to, and this is Lee Camp from RT to explain more.
Thank you all. Welcome to Redacted tonight. This is a comedy show where Americans in America covering American news are called foreign agents. As I mentioned last week, the normally garbage-stained publication, the Washington Post, has actually done some reporting that is not just pro-war propaganda. Someone's gonna get fired for this. They revealed a trove of thousands of internal government documents that expose the catastrophic war in Afghanistan. And it turns out there are Tinder dates between a young neo-Nazi and an old Jewish lady that have gone better than that war. The document trove reveals that senior U.S. officials failed to tell the truth about the war in Afghanistan throughout the 18-year campaign, making rosy pronouncements they knew to be false and hiding unmistakable evidence the war had become unwinnable. Let me translate the Washington Post's fancy pants language. U.S. officials didn't fail to tell the truth. They fucking lied, all right? They fucking lied. Failed to tell the truth sounds like the truth is a fish that they just couldn't catch, you know? We failed to catch the truth. Let's consider what the war in Afghanistan has entailed. By the military's own counting, an estimated 157,000 people have been killed. That includes 64,000 Afghan security forces, 43,000 Afghan civilians, 424 humanitarian aid workers, 67 journalists, 3,800 contractors, 2,300 U.S. military personnel, and 42,000 Taliban and insurgents. But the U.S. military calls all kinds of people insurgents. If we kill you, then you're an insurgent. Because if you weren't an insurgent, then why did we kill you? But even if you use the military's numbers, the bad guys are winning. However, we don't actually know who the bad guys are. In fact, an unnamed former advisor to an Army Special Forces team said they thought I was going to come to them with a map to show them where the good guys and bad guys live. It took several conversations. At first, they just kept asking, but who are the bad guys? Where are they? Yes, that's right. The most powerful military in the world behaves like they're playing with fucking G.I. Joe action figurines. The average Pentagon briefing apparently is a 4-star general holding up figurines and going, bow, bow, oh my leg! Why won't these villagers let us bring them democracy? But I don't understand. In the early years, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had everything under control, except for the fact that internally he said, I have no visibility into who the bad guys are. Clearly he played with the wrong action figures. Well, I'm sure he said the exact same thing to the public back in 2003.
General Franks and I have been looking at the progress that's being made in this country, and in cooperation with President Karzai have concluded that we're at a point where we clearly have moved from major combat activity to a period of stability and stabilization and reconstruction and activities.
A lot of good activities. Yes, no more combat. Just 17 years of reconstruction. Most of our reconstruction is done from the air via bombs.
When we're told that we're spreading democracy, I wrote some notes here, and Christianity, I have two questions for you. Why do other countries need influence of religion from a country founded on freedom of religion? And then also, I guess it's not a question, but more of a statement. Spreading democracy is code for starting another regime change war and committing genocide for oil.
Let that be a lesson, rest of the world. You better not fuck with us, or we'll reconstruct your whole family. This has been a 2 decades long disaster. We've been funding warlords and extremist jihadis and hoping that they'll play nice. Yet American presidents keep telling us that we're making progress. Douglas Lute, a 3-star Army general who served as Afghanistan war czar during the Bush and Obama administrations, told government interviewers in 2015, "What are we trying to do here? We didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking." How dare he? Not the foggiest? If there is one thing that the U.S. takes pride in, it's having a foggy idea of what we're doing. Vietnam, foggy idea. Iraq, very strong foggy idea. Libya, one hell of a foggy idea. Unfettered capitalism, the foggiest idea. We are the best at bad ideas, okay? But these Afghanistan papers unveil a pretty terrible picture. It's shocking, as you can see. I'm shocked. You're shocked. Wolf Blitzer is really shocked.
A bombshell series of investigative reports in the Washington Post exposing heartbreaking truths about the U.S. war in Afghanistan, which has claimed some 2,400 U.S. lives and cost nearly $1 trillion. This is truly a bombshell.
A bombshell! We're not winning the war in Afghanistan. We don't know who the enemy is. I can't believe we're just finding this out. If only we'd known years ago. It came out 3 years ago that the United States is funding both sides of the war in Afghanistan. We're paying the Taliban millions to let our trucks through so that we can fight the Taliban. No wonder a scrappy group of insurgents in torn clothes and sandals are able to compete with the most powerful military in the world. They have us on their side. As you can see, I thought people might listen to me if I had on a tie. Was not the case. If CNN just found out Afghanistan is a catastrophe, I wonder when they'll find out the truth about the war in Iraq. This week, Wolf Blitzer wondered the same thing.
Rebuilding how they taught commanders, taught officials to talk about the war or account for success in the war. Wolf, it's remarkable to see similar problems happen yet again.
I can only imagine and brace for a similar report about the long U.S. war in Iraq as well. I suspect there could be some horrifying news as far as that is concerned.
No one gets anything past you, Wolf! Yes, I think there might be waste, mismanagement, and mass murder in the other wars that you fucking manufactured consent for! You have created! You fucking fake asshole! But I will say, these documents claim that the government, our presidents, lied to us about what was happening in Afghanistan, and I refuse to believe that. Barack Obama never once misled us.
But over the last 3 years, the tide has turned. We broke the Taliban's momentum. We built strong Afghan security forces. We devastated al-Qaeda's leadership, taking out over 20 of their top 30 leaders. Our troops will be coming home. Last year, we removed 10,000 U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Another 23,000 will leave by the end of the summer. After that, reductions will continue at a steady pace with more and more of our troops coming home. And as our coalition agreed, by the end of 2014, the Afghans will be fully responsible for the security of their country.
I'm pretty thrilled for the war to be over in 2014.
Oh, shit.
Whenever that may be. The Afghanistan papers show that not only has the 20-year war been wasteful of human life, it's also been wasteful of money. I know what you're thinking. The military? Wasteful? Well, paint my nipples and call me Phyllis Diller. That's the damnedest thing I ever did here. I mean, there's only $21 trillion unaccounted for at the Pentagon over the past 20 years, and I'm sure they'll find it. I mean, it's probably in the attic. Money has been flowing into Afghanistan so fast, officials aren't even able to waste it quick enough. One executive at USAID guessed that 90% of what they spent was overkill. We lost objectivity. We were given money, told to spend it, and we did without reason. One contractor said he was expected to dole out $3 million daily for projects in a single Afghan district roughly the size of a U.S. county. He said he couldn't conceive of how to spend $3 million a day for people literally living in mud huts. I guess start building furniture out of pallets of $100 bills? Come on, get creative. Let's go. Here's another example, according to the Washington Post. The U.S. military also accused Afghan commanders of pocketing salaries paid by U.S. taxpayers for tens of thousands of ghost soldiers. Ghost soldiers? No wonder we have to be over there. No, I think they mean the Afghan commanders claimed they had a certain number of soldiers, but most weren't even real. So we, America, can't fund the health care of our own goddamn real soldiers who get home and wait in line for months to get any semblance of care, but we can fund ghost soldiers in Afghanistan? Donald Trump just cut food stamps from over 1 million kids, but we're fucking funding ghosts? Maybe we could start a campaign asking the ghost soldiers to donate some of their supper to the starving kids of America. I'm sure the ghosts would understand because unlike Trump, it's not like they're soulless. And here's something else I noticed. This is from a completely unrelated article in the same issue of the Washington Post. The U.S. wasted millions on charter schools. A report found that during the Obama administration, 537 ghost schools in America never opened, but received more than $45.5 million in federal startup funding. Ghost schools? We're funding ghost schools and ghost soldiers, and almost nobody in our government seems to give a shit. I guess you could say they give a ghost shit. It's not really there. But the problems in our forever war don't stop there. The U.S. has spent $9 billion to fight the problem of opium over the past 18 years, but Afghan farmers are cultivating more opium poppies than ever. Last year, Afghanistan was responsible for 82% of global opium production. But what the Washington Post doesn't say is that a lot of that opium was used inside the U.S. to fuel our opioid epidemic. An American dies every 11 minutes from an opioid overdose. So while the Washington Post and the U.S. government act like these dastardly Afghan farmers are growing opium, we're the ones buying it from them, all right? But if you read the fine print of the Constitution, it says, do as I say, not as I do. So how does our government respond when revelations like this come out? Everyone acts shocked. Senators pause in the middle of their T-bone steaks and red wine to say, this needs to be looked into, I dare say. But at the end of the day, they just give the Pentagon more money to sink into a black hole. The spending bill going through Congress this week authorizes $738 billion with almost nothing to constrain the Trump administration's erratic and reckless foreign policy.
So the corporate Dems just voted to increase Trump's military budget. And if he's so dangerous that they need to impeach him, why would they do that? It's because you need to follow the money. They're all bought by the military-industrial complex.
It is a blank check for endless wars, fuel for the further militarization of U.S. foreign policy, and a gift to Donald Trump. Asking the Democrats to stand up against endless wars like asking Anne Hathaway to bench press a Chevy Tahoe, all right? It's not going to happen, and she has no interest in even trying. Stopping these immoral, illegal, repulsive wars cannot be left in the hands of the incompetent and corrupt ruling elite. So it's up to you and me. Coming to you from Washington, D.C.
Think of all the things that we could fix with all that wasted money. We were lied to about Iraq having WMDs and about the Gulf of Tonkin incident the Pentagon Papers revealed we were lied into Vietnam. Daniel Ellsberg was the whistleblower the government went after, but later dropped all charges because the Nixon administration was unlawfully trying to discredit him. So the next thing I want to show you is, here is U.S. Senator Mike Gravel reading the Pentagon Papers on the Senate floor and speaking out against the Vietnam War. The U.S. government tried to go after Gravel. They never prosecuted him. He was running for president this year, and then basically got screwed out of the debates because he didn't actually want to become president, but he wanted to move the conversation to the left and talk about exactly what we're talking about today, ending these regime change wars. And when he dropped out, he endorsed both Tulsi and Bernie Sanders. And the reason he did that is because they are the only two actual progressives that are running that don't take PAC money, that are trying to end these wars and bring socialistic views and policies to the American people to help them out.
The people must know the full story of what has occurred over the past 20 years within their government. The story is a terrible one. It is replete with duplicity, connivance against the public and public officials. I know of nothing in our history to equal it for extent of failure and extent of loss in all aspects of the term. We can people, human beings, are being killed as I speak to you tonight, killed as a direct result of policy decisions we as a body have made. Arms are being severed. Metal is crashing through human bodies because of a public policy. This government one may respond that we made such a sacrifice to preserve freedom and liberty in Southeast Asia. One may respond that we sacrifice ourselves on the continent of Asia so that we will not have to fight a similar war on the shores of America. One can make these arguments only if he has failed to read the Pentagon Papers. That is the terrible truth of it all. The papers do not support our public statements. The papers do not support our best intentions. The papers prove that for 20 years, and certainly for the last 10 years, we have been victims of our Southeast Asia policy, not masters of it.
I apologize if you can hear my dog barking in the background. That is just what she does. Okay. So, like I said, Mike Gravel endorsed Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard. And Tulsi Gabbard has been smeared relentlessly for meeting with Assad. And first of all, that's her job. She's a part of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And second, we just found out that the chemical attacks in Syria were just a coup to get us into another one of these regime change wars. So the whole thing behind Syria is Russia and Iran are working on a pipeline through Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. And if you're not on the U.S. petrodollar, then we'll just come and invade you. This is Mike Prysner. He's an Iraq veteran talking about his experience.
My name is Mike Prysner. I joined the Army, left for basic training on my 18th birthday in June of 2001. I was assigned to the 10th Mountain Division, and in March of 2003, I was attached to the 173rd Airborne Brigade and deployed to northern Iraq. So when I first joined the Army, we were told that racism no longer existed in the military. A legacy of inequality and discrimination was suddenly washed away by something called the Equal Opportunity Program. We would sit through mandatory classes, and every unit had this EO representative to ensure that no elements of racism could resurface. And the Army seemed firmly dedicated to smashing any hint of racism. And then September 11th happened, and I began to hear new words like towelhead and camel jockey and the most disturbing, sand nigger. And these words did not initially come from my fellow soldiers, but from my superiors, my platoon sergeant, my company first sergeant, battalion commander, all the way up the chain of command. These terms, these viciously racist terms, were suddenly acceptable. And I noticed that the most overt racism came from the veterans of the first Gulf War. And those were the words they used when they were incinerating civilian convoys. Those are the words they used when this government deliberately targets civilian infrastructure, bombing water supplies, knowing that it would kill hundreds of thousands of children. Those are the words the American people used when they allowed this government to sanction Iraq. This is something that many people forget, and we can't forget, is that we've just learned that we've killed over 1 million Iraqis since this invasion, but we already killed 1 million Iraqis in the 90s through sanctions and bombings prior to this invasion. So the number truly is much higher. But when I got to Iraq in 2003, I learned a new word, and that word was Haji. Haji was the enemy. Haji was every Iraqi. He was not a person, a father, a teacher, or a worker. And it's important, we've heard this word a lot during Winter Soldier, but it's important to understand where this word came from. And to Muslims, the most important thing is to take a pilgrimage to Mecca. It's the Hajj. And someone who has taken this pilgrimage is a Haji. And it's something that in traditional Islam is the highest calling in the religion. So we took the best thing for a Muslim and made it into the worst thing. But history did not start with us. And since the creation of this country, racism has been used to justify expansion and oppression. The Native Americans were called savages. The Africans were called all sorts of things to excuse slavery. And Vietnam veterans know of the multitude of words used to justify that imperialist war. So Haji was the word we used. It was the word we used on this particular mission I'm going to talk about. And we've heard a lot about different raids and kicking down the doors of people's houses and ransacking their houses. But this mission was different, a different kind of raid. I never got any explanation for these orders. We were only told that this group of houses, 5 or 6 houses, were now property of the U.S. military, and we had to go in and make those families leave those houses. So we went to these houses and informed the families that those homes were no longer their homes. We provided them no alternative, nowhere to go, no compensation. And they were very confused and very scared and did not know what to do and would not leave. So
Imagine this is your home.
We had to remove them from those houses. One family in particular, a woman with 2 small girls, very elderly man and 2 middle-aged men. We dragged them from their houses and threw them onto the street. and arrested the men because they refused to leave, arrested the old man, and sent them off to prison. And at that time, I didn't know what happened to people when we tied their hands behind their back and put a sandbag on their head. But unfortunately, a few months later, I had to find out. We were short interrogators, so I was assigned to work as an interrogator. And I oversaw and participated in hundreds of interrogations. One in particular I'm going to share with you. It was a moment for me that really showed me the nature of this occupation. This particular detainee, when I was sent to interrogate him, he was stripped down to his underwear, hands behind his back, and sandbag on his head. I never actually saw this man's face. My job was to take this metal folding chair and just smash it against the wall next to his head. He was faced against the wall with his nose touching the wall, while a fellow soldier screamed the same question over and over again. No matter what his answer, my job was to slam the chair against his wall. We did this until basically we got tired, and I was told to make sure he stood against the wall for however long, and I was guarding this prisoner, and my job was to make sure he kept standing up, but something was wrong with his leg. He was injured, and he kept falling to the ground. And the sergeant in charge would come and tell me to get him up off his feet. So I'd have to pick him up and put him against the wall. And he kept going down. I just have to keep pulling him up and putting him against the wall. And my sergeant came along and he was upset with me for not, continue to stand. He picked him up and slammed him against the wall several times. And then he left, and when the man went down on the ground again, I noticed blood pouring down from under the sandbag. And so I let him sit, and when I noticed my sergeant coming again, I would tell him quickly to stand up. And I realized that I was supposed to be guarding my unit from this detainee, and at that point I realized I was guarding the detainee from my unit. And I tried hard to be proud of my service, but all I could feel was shame. And racism could no longer mask the reality of the occupation. These were people. These were human beings. I've since been plagued by guilt anytime I see an elderly man, like the one who couldn't walk, who he rolled onto a stretcher and told the Iraqi police to take him away. I feel guilt anytime I see a mother with her children, like the one who cried hysterically and screamed that we are worse than Saddam as we forced her from her home. I feel guilt anytime I see a young girl, like the one I grabbed by the arm and dragged into the street. We are told we are fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It has long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Racism is a vital weapon employed by this government. It is a more important weapon than a rifle, a tank, a bomber, or a battleship. It is more destructive than an artillery shell, or a bunker buster, or a Tomahawk missile. While all those weapons are created and owned by this government, they are harmless without people willing to use them. Those who send us to war do not have to pull a trigger or lob a mortar round. They do not have to fight the war, they merely have to sell the war. They need a public who is willing to send their soldiers into harm's way. They need soldiers who are willing to kill and be killed without question. They can spend millions on a single bomb, but that bomb only becomes a weapon when the ranks in the military are willing to follow orders to use it. They can send every last soldier anywhere on earth, but there will only be a war if soldiers are willing to fight. And the ruling class, the billionaires who profit from human suffering, care only about expanding their wealth, controlling the world economy, understand that their power lies only in their ability to convince us that war, oppression, and exploitation is in our interest. They understand that their wealth is dependent on their ability to convince the working class to die to control the market of another country. And convincing us to kill and die is based on their ability to make us think that we are somehow superior. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen have nothing to gain from this occupation. The vast majority of people living in the US have nothing to gain from this occupation. In fact, not only do we have nothing to gain, but we suffer more because of it. We lose limbs, endure trauma, and give our lives. Our families have to watch flag-draped coffins lowered into the earth. Millions in this country without health care, jobs, or access to education must watch this government squander over $450 million a day on this occupation. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war. I threw families onto the street in Iraq, only to come home and find families thrown onto the street in this country, in this tragic and unnecessary foreclosure crisis. We need to wake up and realize that our real enemies are not in some distant land. They're not people whose names we don't know and cultures we don't understand. The enemy is people we know very well and people we can identify. The enemy is a system that wages war when it's profitable. The enemy is the CEOs who lay us off from our jobs when it's profitable. It's the insurance companies who deny us health care when it's profitable. It's the banks who take away our homes when it's profitable. Our enemy is not 5,000 miles away. They are right here at home. If we organize and fight with our sisters and brothers, we can stop this war, we can stop this government, and we can create a better world.
I can't get through one of his videos without choking up. He's a real freaking hero. Let me find out where I was. Okay, so he said it, but the ruling elite are using our friends and families' lives for profit. And a lot of the so-called left media is pushing Warren as a so-called progressive. She's not. Warren doesn't want to stop the wars. She is for greening up the military, so green bombs, and votes in favor of increasing Trump's military budget. She stood up and clapped when Trump said this country will never be a socialistic country, which when Bernie was sitting right in front of her. She's bought and paid for by her donors, the Clinton camp, and she was a Republican until she was 47 years old. And then she switched when it fit her political needs. The last thing I want you to remember is that 22 vets commit suicide every single day. This is a serious problem. We have to stop these regime change wars. We need to demand better from our leaders. So I will leave you with this. If you ever wonder why a lot of comedians are the ones that are reporting the actual news, this might explain stuff.
But there's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice.
Yeah.
You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now
Yeah.
they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they use to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hardworking people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hardworking people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all. At all. At all. Yeah. You know? And nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. That's what the owners count on, the fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant of the big red, white, and blue dick that's being jammed up their assholes every day. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it. But
I would love to hear what George Carlin has to say these days if he were still alive. That would be awesome. That'd be the best comedy ever. You could always watch the Jimmy Dore show, though, because it's a pretty close second. He tells the truth. He's honest. Fucking rocks. He's hilarious. Anyway, there's other outlets. Graham Elwood from the Political Vigilante, Ron Placone, the Convo Couch. Trying to think of everybody else. RT. Lee Camp is awesome on Twitter. Anyway, please don't forget to hit the like button. It's underneath this video. It's a little thumbs up. It helps spread the word. And also share this on your social medias. Share it with your friends. So you can subscribe to it. Hit the little subscribe. And then, actually, I think I can show you right here what it looks like. Hit the like for me. Hit the share for me. And then hit the subscribe button. And then there'll be a little bell next to that. Hit that too. Because all this stuff helps spread the word and gets everybody else more knowledgeable about this. And until next time, Medicare be with you.